You may not know this about me, but I used to be a history teacher. And one of the reasons why I decided to be a history teacher was because of this powerful experience that I had as a senior in high school. Each year, our senior class got on a plane and flew the entire class across the nation to Washington, D.C. from California to experience our nation's capital. And on that trip, I had a life-changing experience as I walked through the Holocaust Museum of all places. And that experience stopped me dead in my tracks. The museum told the story of how the Jewish people were rounded up, put into ghettos, and then transported to concentration camps where over 6 million of them were murdered. It was an emotionally heavy experience. As we walked out of the wide and long hallway to the exit doors, we walked through a tunnel of sorts where about 15 feet off the wall on both sides were these glass walls that went like 30 feet up to the ceiling. And behind those glass walls were thousands of pairs of shoes all the way to the ceiling. These shoes represented the average number of people killed in one day at Auschwitz. So as we exited this building, you can imagine our entire class sat outside on the marble steps, basically in shock. Some people were crying. Some people stared off into the distance as they tried to process what they'd just seen. My mind was reeling with thoughts of how in the world can humans do this to each other? And how can we make sure that it never happens again? So years later, when I became a teacher, oddly enough, this became my favorite moment in history to teach. Not because I'm some kind of sicko who loves talking about death and genocide, but because the journey to that time where others who were previously good people chose to ignore or actively do something that was so wildly dark and immoral, it was just fascinating, and it was a cautionary tale for all of us. We all have capacity for evil. How do we stop it? You know, this moment in history still stops me in my tracks today every time I think about it. It causes me to pause and think. And one particular story is of a famous neurologist and psychiatrist. His name was Viktor Frankl. He was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud. You might have heard of that guy, and he happened to be a Jew. But because of that fact, he was stripped of everything: his home, his career, his family. Literally every single person in his family was killed in the concentration camp. His wife, his children, his extended family. And he even lost his identity. They took away his name. They gave him a number that was tattooed onto his arm. And as he was placed into this concentration camp during World War II, he was placed in a situation where those camps were very difficult. Prisoners had almost no choices left. They had no control over their food and what they were going to eat. They had no control over their work, over their safety, or even their survival. Everything external was taken from them. And yet Frankl began to notice something. We began to notice that some prisoners became cruel. The difficulties of being put into a concentration camp, it brought out the ugliness inside of them. Some people became hopeless. They gave up on life. Others, though, under the same conditions, they remained compassionate. They would share their last piece of bread. They continued to encourage others. In their spirit, they stood upright, even though their bodies were falling apart under the weight of this brutality. And in this moment, Frankl realized something that was revolutionary. And what he realized was that even when everything is stripped away, there's still one freedom that no one can take from you. It's the freedom to choose your response. He wrote this later in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. He wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, which is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." Think about that for a minute. In a place designed to remove choice, a concentration camp, it doesn't get any worse. People are being murdered. He discovered a choice that no one could take from him. It's the power to choose how he was going to respond. Now, I want to bring this a little bit closer to home for us as leaders, because I know as leaders, there's so many things that you may not control. You may not control staffing shortages. You definitely don't control regulations. You don't control budget pressures all the time. You can't always control complaints that come from the people that you serve or their families. But you still control something. You control how you will respond. You can control your tone. You can control your posture. You can control whether or not you're going to show up in courage or fear. You can control the next decision that you're going to make. You know, so often the temptation in crisis is to give in to choice poverty, where we believe that there's no options, we have no choices left. But that is never true. See, choice abundance isn't about denying reality, but it is about remembering that no matter what the circumstance, no matter how heavy, no one has the authority to remove your ability to choose how you're going to show up. And leadership begins the moment that you remember that.